What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to go over my 10 biggest comic sales losses so far of 2023. I think these are useful to talk about, get an idea of what books are going up, going down, that kind of thing. Let's get into these. All right, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So before I get into this isn't like a pity video or anything like that. I don't want anybody to feel bad for me for these losses or anything. I just think that these are useful pieces of information to talk about that me, as someone who I consider myself a comic dealer, every book isn't going to be a win. Every book isn't going to be something you buy and you sell for a win. Sometimes you have books that go down, you sell for a loss. Sometimes things change in the comic market. Sometimes you want to move books to get cash flow to buy something else. There's all kinds of reasons. But with these 10 books, they exceed $7,000 in losses with these 10. So there are some big ones in here, some that definitely didn't feel great. Now, I will caveat, I do have more wins than losses. Buying and selling comics is a profitable business for me. That's why I said I am not trying to make this some type of pity video or anything like that. However, I think the losses are something that you can learn a lot more from. Like I said, it shows not every sale is a win. Comics don't always go up. You can learn what types of books are risky and how to limit that risk in the future. So I think there is useful information that can come from this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my smallest loss and go to the biggest one. I'll talk about when I purchased the book, what I paid for it, what it sold for, what my dollar and percentage loss was on the book, as well as what might have caused it. So let's start getting into these. All right, now let's get into these books. So first one here we have is Captain America number 117, first appearance of the Falcon. I had a CGC 80 that I lost $503.87. I bought this book on July 18th of 2021 for $1,087. I sold the book on April 20th of this year for $675 plus shipping. Now, my total loss, like I said, was $503 or 46%. I did have some additional expenses that went into this as well, because you can't just subtract out the sale price and the purchase price. There are sometimes other expenses such as eBay fees, shipping, grading, all those kinds of things. So those all have to be brought into account here. So this one, I had $12.07 in shipping, as well as eBay fees of $93.69. With my eBay store, I generally have a 12.35% fee that goes against the book, or it goes against the sale. Sometimes they can be different, and I will mention that if there's some type of variation, but otherwise you can assume 12.35%. So let's take a look at this book in an 8.0, see what happened. So you can see here, moving along up till 2020, this was around a $350, $400 book. Spiked up, had a peak sale of $1,425. When I bought it, like I said, I got it for $1,087. At the time, felt like a good price, but it has just continued to trend down. So what happened with this one? It got super hot when we had the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show, and then it just has been trending down ever since. We haven't really seen that character again since, even though he is the new Captain America. He is going to be in some future movies as that character. But I don't think there's a lot of hype around him as that character either. And so this book has just been continuing to trend down. Now you can see there is a little tick back up right now. A few recent sales have been a little bit higher, but you can actually see my sale on here. My sale, like I said, was April 20th, and it was this sale right here. Now, one thing that you just have to be aware of, that on eBay, one thing that people can do is they can email you or message you within eBay and say, hey, will you take X price? And so with this one, I was messaged and somebody asked if I would take $675. I did. This book was fixed priced at $725. Go Collect is showing the $725 price. So sometimes those fixed prices can be a little off. The auctions are always going to be accurate. The heritage sales are always going to be accurate. Comic Connect, that kind of thing. But the fixed price ones, sometimes there could have been an offer that was taken. And in this case, there was an offer. And so I had sold the book for $675. Now, like I said, you can see maybe a little bit of an uptrend again right now,
but I don't know. I'd be a little wary of this one. We'll see what happens with the character when they ultimately bring him back, but everything is on hold right now. Everything seems to be getting pushed back. So I'm nervous about these types of books where they were quite a bit cheaper prior to the boom and then got hot. And I don't know if they're going to continue up or not. So I'd probably be a little cautious of Captain America 117 right now. All right, let's move on to number 9. And number 9 here, we have Fantastic Four number 52. First appearance of Black Panther. I had a CGC 5.0 that I lost $571.41. I bought this book on May 3rd of 2022 for $1,164. I also bought it raw, so I had additional expenses into this book. Sold it on April 16th for $725, so I had that loss of $571 or 53%. The additional expenses I had into it, $11.05 shipping, $97.36 to eBay, and I had grading and pressing fees of $117. So that's one of those things when you have a book like this, you also have to account for those grading and pressing fees when you're purchasing it. Now, when I bought it, thought I was buying it at a good price at the time, but this book, if you go down and take a look at a 5.0, you can see it spiked significantly going into the comic boom as well. And a 5.0 was around a $650, $700 book, went up to almost $2,000. $1,931 was the peak sale, and it has just been trending down ever since. Its recent sales around $700 to $750 seem like it's probably pretty reasonable now. The only question is with the future of Black Panther in the MCU. I know the MCU isn't everything, but it is a big part of it. And with Chadwick Boseman passing away, there's just big questions into if that character is going to be brought back again. So while I do think it does seem like this book is back in line with those prices, I'm not very confident in the short term for that book, but long term, it does seem to have a pretty consistent uptrend, so it's probably relatively safe. But just something to be aware of, that in the near term, you could still have a little bit of a downtick. All right, let's move on to number 8. Number 8 here, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 299. This is the first cameo appearance of Venom. You have him on the last page. It's very similar to Hulk 180 versus 181. You have Venom on that last page. You see him. It says Venom. I showed that in a prior video when I had a raw copy. I showed the interior of this book. Now, this one, I had a 9.8 that I lost $586.22. I bought this book basically peak comic boom. I bought it on April 4th of 2021 for $999. Sold it on April 8th, 2 years later, basically to the day, for $475 plus shipping. So that's that loss of $586 or 59%. Now, the additional expenses that I had into it, $11.30 shipping, as well as $64.92 in eBay fees. So what happened with this book? Basically, we can see here, this book leading up to the comic boom was around $250, $300 book. Peak sale, $1,247. So this book went especially crazy during the comic boom. And a big part of that was that Venom was extremely hot. We had the Venom movie, we had the Null storyline, you had everything heating up with Miles Morales, so just the Spider-Man hype in general. And that caused this book to get very, very expensive. All Venom keys to get very, very expensive. And it's just been trending down ever since. Now you can see this little spike at the end here. It's actually not a real sale. There's a mislinked sale, so I'll probably notify them afterwards to get that fixed. But there's a New Mutants 98 linked there. That's why you have this big jump here. It has been fairly consistent in the 400 to 475 price point. There is this one high sale down here, but this was a newsstand copy. So that's one of the reasons why you had an exceptionally high number there. It's where it doesn't really fall in line. But generally, this book has been trending down. I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to trend down a little bit more. There is some hype again about Venom, but this book, as well as the other Venom keys, got so expensive, I'd just be pretty cautious about them. All right, now let's move on to number 7. This one was actually on my last list as well. So this book, this is the first appearance of Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. I had a CGC 3.5 that I lost $628.79 on. I bought this book raw on October 5th of 2021 for $1,055. I sold it on February 5th of this year for $625. That was a loss of $628.79 because I had a few extra expenses into it. I had the shipping, $11.05, the eBay fees of $84, but I also had the grading fees. I believe this one cost me around $117. It was probably a standard tier to get graded. Part of the reason was I was not expecting a 3.5. I was expecting around a 5.5. This is the book that is the reason why I put sticky notes on my books now if they have any type of tearing along the spine that I'm concerned about. This one had a 1-inch tear on the bottom of the spine. When I got it back, it had about a 3.5-inch tear on the bottom of the spine. And so that's why now whenever I send in a book, I put it, if I'm worried about the spine in any way that they might open it quickly and add a tear or something like that, I add just a note saying, hey, there is a tear in the bottom of the spine. Please be cautious when opening it. Now, I know people say we shouldn't have to do that. I agree. But once it happens, it's too late. You can't untear the book. So you might as well be extra cautious, put it on there, which I do. Now let's take a look at that 3.5. This one doesn't sell nearly as often, but you can see the spike in the comic boom. It was going for around $400 to $450 leading up to the comic boom. Had a peak sale, looks like, of $825, and it's come back down, and it really does seem like it's about back in line again. I would say the prices that it's at now are very reasonable. I wouldn't be too nervous about picking this book up right now. This book got hot for a couple reasons. One was that Batgirl movie, but it was ultimately canceled because it didn't look very good. It was probably going to lose a lot of money. But the big thing for me was that I was expecting it to be a 5.5 and I got a 3.5. And so that grading differential is really what hurt me on this book the most. But you can't do anything really about it, so you just take the loss on this one and move on to the next book. All right. So next one here, number 6 was Raphael, number 1. This is the first appearance of Casey Jones. He's also on the cover there. Really cool cover. I had a CGC 9.2. I lost $641.40 on this one. This was actually also on my last video that I made about these losses. Not this book, but a different copy. It was an 8.5. This one I lost more on, though. Now, I bought this book in 2020, November of 2020 for $1,065.30. Sold it on May 25th of this year for $500. That's that loss of $641 or 60%. I had some additional expenses into it, the shipping fees of $21.25, as well as the eBay fees of $68.95. Now, let's take a look at this book because this is a perfect example of what happened during the comic boom. We had this book turning along in a 9.2, about a $250 or so book. Peak sale, $1,621. I mean, that is a jump of about 7x, approximately between 6 and 7 times in price over a very short period of time. And when you're in the middle of it, you don't know, our price is going to keep going up, what's happening. But now looking back, 2020 vision, you can see just what's happening and the price is just continuing to drop. Now, there are a few reasons for why this one dropped. One, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles books, they seem to be one of the first books. They were like the canary in the coal mine that really started telling that the comic boom was coming. They were some of the first books to start spiking. And they went huge. And this book especially, the issue was, I believe it had a pretty large print run. I think it was something like 60,000. I don't remember offhand, but not a lot of them were graded. You can see why. At a 9.2, if this book is only worth $225, there's not a lot of motivation to send it into CGC, and magazine grading, especially at that time, was extremely slow. So waiting a long time to get the book back to maybe make $100. But then when the book is going for, near $1,500 to $2,000, then, and in 9/8 way more. So if you thought you had a real high grade copy, you're going to have people just sending in tons and tons of these books. I remember Dave with Comic Book Investments, he talked about that, where he had stacks of them. and he ended up sending a bunch of them in. And so what happens is those initial sales, you get these big numbers, but then just they start coming back from CGC, and it's just the market gets flooded and prices just keep dropping and dropping and dropping. Now, some of these recent prices around $350 to $370 are probably pretty reasonable for this book. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't drop too much more. So I don't think there's a big risk at this point with this book. You can see it's relatively flat for a number of months, but there could still be a little bit of a downtrend, but I feel like the risk is relatively low right now for the Raphael #1. I still think it's a cool book. I think it's a great key, but it just got way too hot for the number of books that are out there. It's not super rare like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1. It is a much larger print run than that book. All right, let's move on to #5. This one was also on my last list. This is Star Wars #42, first appearance of Boba Fett in comics. And you can see, again, had a very similar trend line as that Raphael #1. Let's talk about the numbers a little bit. I had a 9.6 that I lost $694.01 on. I bought this book in August of 2021 for $1,159.81. Sold it in April of this year for $550. That was a loss of $694 or 60%. I had a couple different fees into this one. I had the shipping of $11. I also had 2 eBay fees because I have started using promotions a little bit again. I had stopped for a while. I have started using them for some of my listings again. So I had the $74.83 eBay fee, the standard fee, and then a $12.07 promotion fee. That was a 2% additional fee. Now, there are a number of reasons this book has been dropping. One, just like the other one, it got way too hot, went up way too fast, about 6x for this book. Then we also had The Mandalorian, which got this book to be really hot, but then Boba Fett was a huge disappointment. So you had the disappointment from Boba Fett, you had the heat from Mandalorian, and the fact that this book just went up way too far too fast. And so it's just continued to trend down, and I think it probably will continue to trend down a little bit more. I would just be cautious around it. I could see this book getting down into the mid 300s in this grade. And so I would just be a little wary of it still. That's just my take on it. We'll see. I've just generally been following this. If the prices prior to 2020, if there was some type of trend up with them, then what does that trend extend to? And I could see this one coming back down some. All right, let's move on to #4, and that is Amazing Spider-Man #50, first appearance of Kingpin. I had a CGC 5.0 that I lost $736.06 on. I bought this book raw on December 12th, 2021 for $1,409. I did not buy this book at the right time. I was kind of expecting some spikes to happen from the Hawkeye show, and it didn't really happen. It was for a short period, but then it just dropped very hard. I sold this book on March 25th of this year for $975. So I had a loss of $736 or 52%. Now, again, I had a few different expenses into this: shipping of $11.30, eBay fees of $122.44, and grading and pressing fees of, I think, around $117 or so. Because I think this was also a standard submission, or what is now called, I think, high value, something like that. But there are a number of reasons for the loss on this book. Let's take a look at that 5.0. So we'll take a second for this to load here. So let's take a look at the 5.0. And again, you can see it doesn't have like the immediate spike, but it had a longer gradual uptrend. And so prior to the comic boom, going for around $400, which seems crazy. It really does with how big of a key this book is. I'll say like a Silver Age major Spider-Man key, $400 for a 5.0 just seems kind of crazy. But it peaked at almost $2,000, $1,957. It is now back around $700, $800 seems to be what a lot of these sales have been about now. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this book still has a little bit of a downtrend to continue. You can tell it has flattened quite a bit for a number of months, but it still seems to have this general downtrend, and I think it still has a little ways to drop. Now, there are a couple reasons why I took the loss on this one. I mean, one of them was that bought at the wrong time. It had spiked, and it's just continue to trend down. The other reason is that I had thought this one was going to be a 5.5 and it got a 5.0, and that half grade can mean, you know, $100-$200. I still would have taken a pretty decent loss on this book, but maybe a little bit less than I did. So combination of hype around the MCU and then that all dying off and then not hitting the grade I thought I would hit, all just results in that $736 loss. I do think it's a great book, just got too expensive like everything else, and I think it still could trend down a little bit more. All right, now the next one. This was also, I think, on my last list. This is Special Marvel Edition number 15. I had a CGC 9.4 that I lost $828.05 on. Bought this book on May 9th of 2022 for $1,550. Sold it on June 10th of this year for $850 plus shipping. Loss of $828 or 53%. I had a couple expenses into this. I had the shipping fees of just about $11 and eBay fees of $113. This is the first appearance of Shang-Chi. This book got extremely expensive because it was perfectly primed for the comic boom. So if we go down and check out a 9.4, we can see there were two spikes here. The first spike was earlier on when we had I think this is largely around the announcement of the Shang-Chi movie. But the second one was when the trailer came out. So trailer came out in April of 2021. And you can see that peak sale for a 9.4, $3,216. I mean, this book went from, prior to him being a character really in the MCU, around a $300 book and a 9.4. Then it corrected down to around a $950 to $1,000 book after the hype died down some. Then with the comic boom, over tripled to $3,216. Just massive jumps. And you can see this book has been trending down since. And there's been a couple things that I think have caused this. I actually feel like it's overcorrected at this point. I think this book in a 9.4 now going for around $800. It seems wild to me. And like I said, that's what I sold mine for, $850. That's right around where this book is now. I think this book has overcorrected, but there's some things that have hurt it. We haven't had Shang-Chi again in the MCU. It's like you have this big movie around him that was 2 years ago now, and you rarely ever have heard anything about the character again. Marvel has just left this character on the back burner, and this is what's happened. You just have this downtrend. Now, I could see this book getting some spikes again if we start to get some more news about that character, but it's been so long. Like I said, almost 2 years since we've really heard anything. And so that's what's really been dragging, in my opinion, this book down. Now, I don't see this book getting back to these pre-Marvel prices, $200, $300 for a 9.4. I don't think that'll happen at all. I think these prices up around here, in the 2020, around the 900 price point, are probably pretty realistic. And it has corrected below that. And so we've had some prices down. Let's see here, 719, 811, 790. I think that these prices are just lower than what the book is really worth at this point. So I think this is one that is not a bad book to be picking up right now. Shang-Chi, first appearance, Special Marvel Edition 15, I think is a pretty reasonable book. I would go for the highest grade affordably, that you can get. I mean, a 9.4 going for under $1,000 for a Bronze Age, relatively early Bronze Age key, 1973, black cover. I mean, a 9.4 is in the top 16%, 9.2 is in the top 25%. I'd be aiming for something up in the 9s if I was looking to pick up this book right now. But that's my opinion on it. I know some people probably think like, well, the character wasn't popular before. I mean, hell, there's lots of characters like that the MCU has made popular. And then those values in those books completely change. They re-baseline. And I think that's the case that will likely happen here. And I think this book has overcorrected. All right, now for number 2, Venom is back again. We've got Amazing Spider-Man number 316. This is the first full cover appearance of Venom done by Todd McFarlane. I had a 9.8, lost $861.77 on this one. I bought this one also at the peak of the comic boom, March 21st, 2021 for $1,350. Sold it on June 12th of this year for $630, a loss of $861 or 64%. I had a couple expenses into this one. $10.45 for shipping and $77 and change for eBay fees. We already talked about Venom, same reasons, just got super hot because of Null and the movie and everything, and it has just cooled off a lot since then. Let's take a look at a 9.8. And you can see, I mean, just look at this. It's crazy though. Again, a 9.8 going around $300. That seems crazy for one of the coolest Venom covers that's out there. But it is what it is, and it spiked up to almost $2,000, $1,812 looks like about the peak sale here, and it has been trending down ever since, going for around $550 to $600 now. I could see it continuing to trend down. Even it's hard. I hate saying it because I love this cover. I think it's such a cool cover, one of the best Venom covers ever done. And but I could see this book continuing to trend down, so I would steer clear of it. Right now. For now, I would. All right, now the big one. This is the one that lost over $1,000 on this one. This was Giant Size X-Men #1. I had a CGC 7.5, lost $1,161.56. I bought this book on October 24th of 2021 for $4,228.64. Sold it in April of this year for $3,400. That was a loss of $1,161 or 28%. Now the percentage, not as high as some of the other books. Those other books I got up into the 50, 60+% loss. This one just 28%, but is a much more expensive book. So the total loss was worse. Now I had a couple expenses into this one. I had shipping fees of $11, and then I had eBay fees of $261.79. Now, the eBay fees are a little less on this one than you might have expected because it is still normally the 12%, but because I have a store, you get a reduced fee above $2,500 in sales. So that's why the eBay fee is actually not as bad. That actually made things a little better for me. I didn't even lose more if it had been 12%, because at $4,000 sale, that would have been over $500 in fees, and instead we're at $261. So that helped me out a little bit, but still a big loss. This is obviously a major key. First appearance of the new X-Men, first appearance of Storm, Nightcrawler, second full appearance of Wolverine, all that kind of stuff. You have a bunch of great characters being introduced here, or very recently introduced. And so this is one of the major books of the Bronze Age. You've got Hulk 181, you've got Giant Size X-Men 1, Amazing Spider-Man 129. I mean, those are three of the big marquee Marvel books. But just like everything else, it can get too expensive, and it did. So at a 7.5, let's take a look at these prices. So leading up into the comic boom, now we did have a spike earlier on, back in 2019. I believe this was around when the X-Men were reacquired by Marvel. And so that adds some hype, because you get that the characters are going to get a little more exposure. Then it corrected back down some, going around $2,000, $1,800, spiked to, look at that number, $7,650. This book went nuts. Like in a 9.8, this book, I think, peaked somewhere around $75,000, somewhere in that range. And it's now going for, I believe, around $35,000. So it's corrected across all the grades. Right now, this book in this grade is going for, it seems like somewhere in the $3,000 to $3,500, $3,300 range. And like I said, I sold this one back in April for $3,400. So kind of right around there. Maybe it's trended down a little bit more since then, but not too much. If you watch my recent Bronze Age key video, I talked about this one. I think it still has some room to correct. Now, I do think the X-Men, obviously it seems like they're going to start using them at some point again in the MCU. We're getting some characters that are mutants that are in there. We've got Wolverine in the next Deadpool movie, that kind of stuff. But at least in the near term, I think it still does have a little bit of a correcting to do. You can see there have been some upticks. Maybe that's because of the Deadpool Wolverine thing. Maybe that's what's caused a few recent spikes in this book. But this book got super hot. You can see that in the chart here. Crazy big jumps. X-Men got extremely hot during the comic boom. And you can see that it's been correcting for quite a while now. And yeah, I do think it still has a little bit of a ways to drop. But you never know if you get it for a good deal. you catch one of these, big downswings, maybe it's still a decent time to pick it up. All right. So now let's talk about the overview here, how we can apply this information, this knowledge. I mean, it is, I know some people just like to hear about the losses, but also what can we learn from that? How can you apply that either to, if you're building a business, a comic buying and selling business, if you're investing in comics, even if it's just collecting and you still feel like want to make informed decisions. And so for me, the main goal there is to have more wins than losses. If you want to have a profitable business or have an investment that's profitable, you want to have more sales go your way than don't go your way. And so here, yeah, I'm talking about the losses, but overall for me, so far this year for 2023, 87% of my sales are profitable. So that's 13% are losses. Overall, I feel like that is pretty good. And when you look at the size of the losses or size of the wins, I mean, my most profitable sale was I made $4,760. A big profitable sale like that wipes out a lot of losses. And so you just have to look at it from the perspective of your wins and losses, and not necessarily worry about every single sale being a win, because it can't be. Everything can't be right all the time. I mean, yeah, maybe if you bought your books all back in in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s, even early 2000s, maybe everything can be a win. But if it's been within the last 5 years, that's not always going to be the case. Now, one of the other things that's important here is that you'll notice a lot of the books on here that were losses were books that had some type of catalyst that would cause them to go up in price, whether it's first appearance of Boba Fett, where we had the Mandalorian and Boba Fett, or we had the first appearance of Batgirl, where you had that movie, or we have Special Marvel Edition with Shang-Chi. There's some event that's going to happen that's going to cause the prices of those books to go up. If you realize that that event has happened and the books are dropping now, that's when you should probably just cut your losses and move on to something else. If you want to hold long-term, if you want to, just hold forever, that's fine. But at those points, if you're buying a book for some type of event to happen, if that event happens and the books start to drop, you just need to cut your losses and sell the book. That's when you need to make your decision to do that. For me, I enjoy actively buying and selling books. You see all my unboxing videos and everything. I like getting in new books. I like having that cash flow available to buy cool new stuff. And so I have to constantly be buying and selling to be able to do that. So even with some of these, if I'm at a loss, it's not the end of the world for me. I can sell that. I can use that money to buy something else. Now, the other thing you have to realize is that there is a time value to money. I mean, yeah, if you are, say, down on a book and it's going to take, with the normal trends of the book, 5 years to get back to even on it. Yeah, you could wait that 5 years. And then when you sell it, you could say, all right, I didn't lose anything on that book. Or if you're someone like me who is actively buying and selling, I could sell the book even though I take a loss. And on the next 1 or 2 flips that I make for that book, buys and sells that I make for that book, I can make my money back. And so I would much prefer to go that route. It's also more fun for me. I get to own a lot more books over that period of time. And so it's whatever you're comfortable with. If you'd rather just wait and not take the loss, that's fine. But for me, I would rather sell something and then buy something else and try to turn that into more money again in the future. That's how I prefer to do it. Now let's talk about some of the trends that we saw with these. Like I said, most of these books that I took the losses on were driven by speculation or movie hype. We had Shang-Chi, we had Venom, Boba Fett, Kingpin, Batgirl, Falcon. And so I'm not saying that those types of books are bad investments, but like I mentioned just a minute ago, you need to realize that when that event has occurred and if that event fails, then you need to move on from it. If that's the reason you're buying it, you got to move on from it. Now, the last thing here is with those trends, if you see the books dropping, you do need to kind of be on top of your sales prices if you're listing books for sale, because other people are going to be selling their books too. And that's where you start getting a lot of undercutting, especially with bronze and silver and modern, where you have hundreds, if not thousands of copies readily available for people out there. People are going to start undercutting each other. So sometimes you might need to drop your price a little more aggressively, a little quicker, just to make sure you move it. Otherwise, you're just going to be following that line down. You're never going to sell it, and the price is just going to keep dropping. That is what happened to me on a couple of these books. I kept following that line down, where I probably would have been better off if I had just taken a bigger cut earlier on. I actually would have lost less on the book. So just a few things that I think would be useful for anyone out there, whether you are buying and selling comics as a business or an investment or collecting. I mean, it's always useful to have as much information as possible when you're making these decisions, because a lot of these books, like you see here, they're not cheap. A lot of these books are fairly expensive. It's a lot of money. So you might as well try to make the most informed decision that you can.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that video. Maybe this helped learn some things about where those risky books are, or the types of things you need to do if you are in a position where you're at a loss of the book, what your options are. And that just, you got to remember, not everything goes up. There are always books that are going to be more risky, speculative books, especially, that kind of thing. But if you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the notification bell, all that kind of stuff. I've got more videos over here. If you'd like to watch some of my other videos, subscription button is right here. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I would really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.